So we were discussing about the types of listening. The third category comes under the types of listening is critical listening. Now, critical listening, what is critical listening? Critical listening involves analyzing and evaluating the content of the message. That means the listener used to assess whether the information is correct, valid, or relevant or not. So, what here this type of listening is used to judge the credibility and quality of the information. So, critical listening involves analyzing and assessing whether the content which we have used in the message, in the uh, information which you are using is accurate or not, right? So the characteristics of such type of listening includes evaluation, analysis, skepticism, right? So let's address one by one. Evaluation means judging the credibility, whether the content which you are sharing is authentic, is the true, is being collected from the true source, the quality is good of the information or not, or is the content is having the logical stuff or not, or it is just having the vague information. So you have to make sure that there is accuracy, the concrete information is there, and it is also having the relevant data, irrespective of unnecessary inclusion of information, right? Next comes is the analysis. In this part, we usually used to break down the message into different components to understand it better. For example, if we are going through some letter, we used to, if we are listening to some presentation, we listen to some, we can say proposal. What we do, we used to break it down or segment it into three different parts: the introductory part, the content part, and the conclusion part. So what happens is we get the better understanding of the overall content, right? Next comes is the skepticism. Skepticism here means questioning the assumptions and arguments. Like the questions which we must question the assumptions, what assumptions has been made over there, what arguments are being presented in that particular content. So we used to question it, we used to get answers, we used to check whether the validity is there or not, right? So an example can be: a student critically listens to a lecture, questioning the validity of the research presented and cross-referring it with other sources. So what the student is doing is just referencing it with the other sources of the research, whether the research is presented as valid or not, right? So moving towards the next type of listening is, the next type of listening is empathic listening. In this type of listening, uh, the practice of this type of listening involves putting yourself into the shoes of other, right? You have to focus on the emotional connection and support. It is the basic practice of understanding and sharing the feelings and perspective of the speaker, right? You have to focus on what speaker is what mindset the speaker is having, what emotional connect he wants to maintain. So you have to just understand where, on the place of, you have to keep yourself in the place of the speaker, and then you have to take some decisions, right? So you have to empathize it, feel and understand the emotions of the speaker. Next characteristic is compassion. You have to show genuine concern for the speaker, right? You don't have to sympathize. You have to show the genuine concern for the well-being of the speaker, right? You have to be non-judgmental. You have to accept the speaker's feelings without criticism. When we are talking about empathy, we talk about accepting the feelings of the speaker, of the someone, without criticizing them, right? So, example here we can take example of a friend who is listening empathetically to the another friend, which, or a person who is going through a very tough time, and providing him comfort and support without offering any unsolicited advice, or without making any criticism or without giving any negative feedback, right? So when we talk about empathy, we used to empathize with the speaker. We used to understand how the speaker might be feeling, or the speaker must be nervous if the person is a first time speaker. So in that case, we have to cooperate, and we have to show the genuine concern for the well-being of the speaker, right? So this explains the empathic listening. Now, coming to the last type of listening is selective listening. Let's see. When we talk about selective listening, here, as the word itself defines the meaning, that selective listening occurs when a listener only hears part of the conversation that interests them and ignores the rest. As the name suggests, selective. So, a listener will listen to the only the content which is the interest, which will be matching the interest of the person only, right? The rest of the content will be ignored. Why? Because he is not interested in rest of the content. He has received the content, he has retained only the content which is matched to his interest. So partial attention. So let's see the characteristics. The characteristics here includes partial attention. Focusing, that means focusing only on the segment of the conversation. Instead of focusing on the entire conversation, the listener is selectively listening to his interest only, right? The next is bias. As it is a preconceived notion, as it is about interest, so here the listening becomes biased. The next characteristic is filtered understanding. As the listener has missed out the complete message. So in this case, what happens here is he will only understand, he will only get to retain the fact which he has received. Instead of understanding the entire message, only the filtered understanding will be there. Only the part of understanding which he has retained will be there. So we can take the example of during a meeting, an employee only pays attention when the topics related to project are discussed and tunes out the rest. So that person is only concerned about the projects, the topics which is related to projects. He is not concerned about what other matters are being discussed. The policies at workplace, the workplace environment, the other guidelines, or some other progress reports or financial statement. But he is only focusing on the project parts, like what project is to be completed, what are the tasks allocated. So he, in this case, we can say he is a selective listener. Why? Because he has chosen his area of interest, that is project, and I have to listen to only this stuff. Rest of the thing he used to ignores. So these type of listening can have a very bad impact as well, because sometimes it is important to listen the complete information. Without uh, listening to the complete information, we cannot understand it, right? Now, how can we enhance our listening skills? As active listening, by these listenings, the different types of listenings can be enhanced. But how? Let's see. We can enhance active listening by practicing mindfulness, avoid distractions during conversation. We can be able to listen actively only when we'll avoid distractions, when we'll meditate, when we'll try to relax our mind, right? Next is passive listening. When we talk about passive listening, it recognizes situations where passive listening is appropriate, such as when multitasking. When you are multitasking, then only you can use passive listening, right? Next is critical listening. It is developed when we used to think critically and we used to practice it by evaluating information critically. We must listen to the podcast, we must listen to the other tutorials, and then we try to evaluate it. So in this case, this will help out to develop the critical thinking skills, right? Next comes is empathic listening. Foster emotional intelligence and practice putting yourself in others' shoes. As I mentioned, what you have to do is you have to give a very good check on your emotional intelligence. Now, what emotional intelligence over here means? Emotional intelligence is all about controlling your emotions, having a good control over your emotions, and making sure your emotions doesn't act as a barrier in effective communication. In anger, you cannot shout on your boss, right? Or you cannot hit anyone in your professional setting, even in personal house also you cannot do that. If you are not in a very good mood, you must take time, must try to relax, burst out your stress, and then start conversation, right? You do not you don't indulge into conversation when you are in a bad mood. Try to distance yourself, try to keep your mind and everything, put your emotions into a very calm and cool mode so that you may relax. Because if you are in anger or if you are in anxiety and you indulge in some sort of argument, it may lead to bad consequences. So in that case, what you have to do is, if you are in your professional settings, if there are any chaos, then instead of bursting out, instead of shouting, you try to control your emotions and relax over there. This will be done when you practice empathizing. Instead of sympathizing, you have to start empathizing, right? And the moment you will do that, you will come to know that yes, at that particular level, there is pressure. That person is under stress only. That's why that person is in aggression or is talking like the way he is. So you have to empathize rather than just criticize people or sympathize. Next comes is selective listening. Be aware of the tendency to selective listening and strive to fully engage in conversation. Now, as I already mentioned, you try to focus on the entire conversation instead of listening to the selective part, because unless and until you will hear the complete conversation, you won't be able to get the complete understanding of it, right? For example, if you hear the podcast of some motivational speaker, then in that case, if you're not able to hear the entire session, you won't be able to reap the maximum benefit. And only if you are understanding the selective thing, that is good. You are retaining the things which are interested to your area, but you don't have every time look towards your interest only. You have to understand the entire conversation, and then only you can uh, practice the effective listening skills, right? Moving towards the next slide. Now we'll be talking about the different barriers to listening. What are the barriers to listening? As there is barriers to communication when we talk, when we write, when we speak. So there are barriers when we are listening as well. So let's see what barriers are there. So there are basically 5 types of barriers. So when it comes to listening, number one is physical barrier. Number second is psychological barriers. Number third is physiological barriers. Fourth one is environmental barrier. And the last one is semantic barriers. We will be discussing it in more detail. Now, number one is physical barrier. Here, physical barrier includes two things, that is background noise or hearing impairments, right? So let's see what background noise includes. Background noise says this includes any unwanted sound that interferes with the ability to hear the primary message. So, for example, traffic noise, conversation in a crowded room or near machineries, right? So what happens is there is a noise, there is a disturbance or the sound which is not very much pleasant, or some unwanted sound that interferes the ability to hear. So that is known as physical barrier. It includes traffic noise or might thundering, or we can say the crowded area where we are communicating. So these can be the examples of background noise. Now coming to the hearing impairments, as it is already mentioned, the people who are having hearing issues and find it challenging to hear and interpret spoken messages accurately, which is affecting communication. Why? Because as they are unable to hear properly, there are some issues with the hearing sense. So in that case, it may lead to some obstacle. Next barrier is psychological barrier. Now, what is psychological barrier? Psychological barrier includes stress, anxiety, and prejudices. So what stress over here means? Stress means high level of stress which can preoccupy an individual's mind. As I mentioned, as you are in a stress, you are having too much of anxiety, too much of aggression. So in that case also, you may not be able to hear properly as your mind is being indulged in some other sort of emotion, right? So this can result in missing important information or misinterpreting the message. As you are not in a proper zone, proper mood, proper focus is not, you're not able to focus properly. So it might lead to misinterpretation of the message. The next comes is anxiety. Similar to stress, anxiety can distract individuals, causing them to focus more on their anxious thoughts rather than conversation at hand. So what happens here is you have to take proper care of your emotions. As I mentioned, practice meditation, practice deep breathing so as to relax yourself, overcome the anxiety and stress, and then convert and then start the conversation, because anxiety and aggression can lead to bad consequences, right? May lead to the conversation into a heated argument, right? So now talking about the third subheading in psychological barrier is prejudice, like preconceived notions or biasness against the speaker or the topic he has taken to speak on. So the topic can lead to selective listening, where the listener only hears the what aligns their interest or their beliefs and dismisses the message altogether. So what happens here is that your biasness or your preconceived notions may act as a barrier, as you will only retain the thing which you want to listen, which is in your area of interest, right? And altogether you will miss the other message. So you have to avoid that, because it also will hamper your effective communication, right? Moving towards the next barrier. The next barrier is physiological barrier. Now, what is physiological barrier? As physiological is related to the body, the health of an individual. So we'll be talking about when an individual is tired, ability to concentrate and process information deteriorates, or we can say diminishes. So it is harder to listen effectively. That means if a person is ill or if a person is tired, right? Fatigue here means tired. If an individual is tired, he has came from a very long journey. He has been traveling for more than 12 hours. So that person will not be able to concentrate properly, or may miss some information, or may able to misinterpret the information. So it also acts as a barrier. Your health should be, you must be okay, you must be healthy enough, you must be in a very good condition to interpret the proper information, to listen carefully, right? To be an effective listener, you have to keep your emotions in control. You have to be in a proper mindset, in a proper geographical location, in a proper we can say location where there is no crowd, where is there is no noise or any hindrances, right? The next is illness. Illness is physical discomfort. Someone is in a pain, or someone is very ill, so he or she cannot pay full attention to what you are saying, because their mind is deviating from that particular thing to the pain they are having or the discomfort they are having, right? Next comes the environmental barriers. We'll be discussing the environmental barriers. As the name suggests, it is all about the environment. So, environment can includes poor acoustics, distractions. So, environment with poor sound quality, such as rooms with echo or lack of soundproof, can make it difficult to hear and understand speech, as the voice will echo. So, the speaker also might get distracted and the listener will, right? So, the poor environmental conditions may also act as a barrier in effective listening. Next comes is distractions, visual or physical distractions in the environment, such as people moving all around or vibrant decor, or can uh, divert attention away from the conversation. So, the distractions which may be caused by the environment or the people who are there in the particular people passing by those environments. Suppose if I'm conducting a video lecture for you all and people are coming behind me, so it will cause a distraction to me as well as to you. So distraction can be visual or physical, right? So we have to avoid it, uh, in which will result into effective listening, right? Let's see, the last barrier is semantic barrier. So this barrier explains the semantic is the study of words and sentences. So due to different meanings of different words, sometimes it happens people used to misinterpret it. So misunderstandings due to different interpretations, words or phrases can have different meanings to different people, right? For example, jargons are used as a technical issues. The term which is used for technical issue, and technical jargons are some terms which cannot be easily understood by common people. These things are being understood by experts only who are into technical experts. Slangs or technical term that listener is unfamiliar can lead to barrier or confusion and also results into misinterpretation of the message, right? So understanding these barriers will help you in developing good strategy to mitigate the impact and improve your listening skills, such as creating good listening environment, managing stress, and aware of biasness and prejudice, right? So if you work on these barriers, you will be able to listen effectively, and also you will be able to communicate effectively. Now, moving towards the next slide. Now we'll be discussing what factors are important and what factors to be considered for effective listening. Let's start. So there are basically 5 factors: attention, open-mindedness, empathy, feedback, and non-verbal communication. So as attention here means you have to be an attentive listener. You have to have an open-mindedness. You must think about that you must be acceptable. You must accept everything the speaker is saying. You have to be open-minded, right? Unless you are open-minded, you will not be able to absorb the information. Next, when we talk about empathy here means you have to accept the speaker. You have to be concerned about the well-being of the speaker. Instead of being judgmental, you have to show the concern for the speaker. When we talk about feedback, must be acceptable to feedback, must use constructive in a feedback in a constructive manner so as to improve in coming future. The other thing comes is non-verbal communication. Why? Because non-verbal communication is important. Your words might not go with your facial expressions. Your body language may not be in sync. or your gestures might not be going with. So for effective listening, you have to make sure you are giving a good body language with a good facial expression and a positive gesture. Let's discuss. So attention here means focusing fully on the speaker without distraction. Effective listening requires dedicating one's full attention to the speaker, avoiding multitasking, putting away electronic devices, and mentally preparing to concentrate, right? So you have to be attentive, removing all the distractions, right? Next is open-mindedness, being willingly to hear and consider different perspective of individuals. So you have to accept the perspective of every individual. You have to be open to new ideas and perspective, even if the ideas are different from yours, right? So this involves no judgment or avoiding premature conclusion and being receptive to the speaker, right? Next comes empathy, understanding the feelings of the speaker. You have to build a connection with the speaker and respond in a more compassionate and understanding manner, right? You have to respect the understanding and emotions of the speaker. Next comes is feedback, providing appropriate responses and clarifications. Being effective listening includes putting verbal and non-verbal feedback to the speaker. You can use smiling, you can give verbal affirmations using I like it or I understood. And when we talk about non-verbal affirmations, you can do it by nodding your head, by making an eye contact, and asking questions for clarification, so that speaker also shows active engagement, right? And it also shows that you are also actively involved in the interaction, right? Next comes patience and non-verbal communication. When we talk about patience, patience allow the speaker to express themselves fully without interruption, right? Patience is very important. You have to be a good listener when it comes to communication. If you only speak and will not listen, you won't be able to understand the perspective of the other person. So it involves giving the speaker enough time to articulate their thoughts and without rushing into interruptions. This shows respect and help in understanding the complete message. Non-verbal communication, as I mentioned, you have to use your positive body language, maintain proper eye contact, appropriate facial expressions must indicate that yes, the listener is fully engaged in what the conversation is going on and is interested. And these cues help in building rapport and trust with the speaker. So all these factors must be practiced so as to become a very effective listener, right? You have to be an effective listener to deliver a effective communication. Let's see. We have, I have mentioned some prominent individuals who are known for their exceptional listening skills. When we talk about India, in India, Mahatma Gandhi was renowned for his ability to listen to people for all walks of life. His approach to leadership involved understanding the needs and concern of the masses, which greatly influenced his strategies for India's independence movement. Right. So Mahatma Gandhi was one of the most prominent, exceptional listening skill was there. And the second comes Mr. Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India. And Mr. Modi has been known for his Man Ki Baat on radio program, where he listens to the concerns and suggestions of common citizens and address them directly. So we can take example of Mr. Narendra Modi as well, as he is also a very effective listener and an effective speaker too. Next comes Ms. Sudha Murty. She's an author and a social worker and is uh, also a better half of our Mr. Narayan Murthy, the owner of the Infosys, the CEO of the Infosys. So is known for her empathetic listening and which she uses to understand and address the issue faced by underprivileged community. So these people, when we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, Narendra Modi, and Sudha Murthy, they act as a prominent individuals with highly exceptional listening skills. When we talk about people from abroad, from the foreign country, Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, is being recognized as the most effective listener as his ability to listen and understand is the perspective of even his adversaries, which played a crucial role in the peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy, right? So he is considered to be a very effective listener. Barack Obama, the former president of United States, was also known for listening towards where he engaged directly with the citizens to hear their concerns and ideas. So his empathetic listening highlighted his leadership skills. Oprah Winfrey, as a media mogul and talk show host, is also known for ability to listen deeply to her guests and make them feel heard and understood. So I hope you may also came to know about the entire concept of listening and the different types. What are the factors to be considered for effective listening? What different types of listening are? And you may also be must be informed about all these personality. You can go and search for many more such personality and try to inspire yourself from them so as to communicate effectively in your uh, personal settings as well as professional settings. So for today, I would like to end the session over here and will meet you in the next session. Thank you.